So I just want to welcome everybody to Higher Efficiency Equals Higher Revenue Seekers from the Trim Room. My name is Jonathan. I work on the Mobius marketing team. We're about ready to get started. Just want to thank you all for joining us. Got a really good session today that I think is going to be really helpful for you, regardless of what your position is at your own facility. We're also going to be answering a couple questions after each segment with a longer Q&A right at the end. So, but please hit the Q&A button towards the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type in questions in there as they come up. If it's something we can answer quickly and easily, we'll just type the answer right there for you. Otherwise, we'll answer live. We'll kind of just fit it into the right moment. So I think with that, we're about ready to kick things off. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Brett and AJ at Mobius HQ there in Vancouver. Take it away, guys.
Howdy, guys. Welcome to our first, hopefully, of many webinars. My name is Brett with Mobius. Full disclosure, I've never even seen a webinar before, let alone hosted one. So I'm looking forward to your feedback on things that we can do better for the upcoming series as we go forward. And also any suggestions for topics that you guys would like to see covered. For today's topic, we decided to focus on planning the post-harvest operations for greater efficiency. Oftentimes when we're in trim rooms, we see things that are really overlooked. Bottlenecks that are created unnecessarily. And at the end of the day, everyone's in this to maximize dollars, maximize efficiency, and get the most out of it they possibly can, reduce the headaches, and gain control of your trim room. So today you've got myself, Brett Lane, Mobius. You've got AJ, also with Mobius. AJ's visited dozens and dozens of trim rooms along the way. And we're super lucky to have as our expert guest, if any of you follow us on Instagram, Mobius Trimmer on Insta, you'll recognize Curtis Marshildon, who is the processing supervisor for Can Group here in BC. Curtis has been there, done that, got the t-shirt. He's worked in all kinds of cannabis and hemp-related scenarios, used all kinds of different trim solutions out there, and he's got some really fantastic feedback for us. So thanks a million for being here today with us, Curtis. Now I'm going to pass it over to AJ. She'll go over our agenda and we'll take things from there.
Great. Thanks, Brett. And welcome to the webinar. As Brett said, been into a bunch of trim rooms and had a chance to see a couple of people who were signing on there. So I've been to some of your trim rooms. Thanks for joining today. So we're going to be covering 4 main topics today. We're not really going to be getting into the machine until the very end. But what we're going to cover are the basics of trim room layout and design, product handling and flow, so how it's getting in and out of the room, in and out of the machine, optimization of system feeding and the results that are coming out of the other end, and then summarizing that with how you're going to staff that trim room. So Brett and I are going to be going over some of the key recommendations and points for each of those topics. And then we're going to hand it over to Curtis after each one of those so that he can comment on what they're doing at his facility and some of the stuff that he's learned along the way. And then we'll make time for some questions as we go along. And as Jonathan said, open it up to general questions at the end of the session. So we're going to kick things off right now with trim room layout and design. That's our first topic here. So when we're taking a look at trim room layout and design, airflow and temperature management are the 2 key factors you want to take a look at. A lot of you may or may not have the ability to make a lot of changes to this in your facility, but ideally we want to be keeping the temperature in the room as low as possible. So in Canada, we would say trying for 18 degrees Celsius or lower. In the States, that's about 64, 65 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. That's really going to help out with managing the resin buildup on the product and just keeping the product in nice condition as it's in the totes waiting to get trimmed or after processing. So trying to keep that temperature down low, and airflow really helps there as well. We want to make sure not only is room staying cool, but that it's staying nice and clean in there. So air handling units connected to the room. If you've already got a full build out and you feel like you need a bit of a boost there, if you can invest in some air conditioning units for the room, that will really, really help out. Second thing, if it's possible to have 2 entry and exit ways in the room, that is really helpful for preventing bottlenecks. So if you're in the midst right now of planning for construction or doing a renovation and you haven't put that into your plans, Try to have those two separate entrance exit points for the room. If you've only got one because you're already built out and you've just got a single door, and actually that's the situation for Curtis's facility, try and have a recognized flow of traffic for the room so people know where things are coming in and the timing for that, and how things are moving out of the room, because you're not generally just talking about people moving in and out, but you're moving in carts and totes, maybe scales, things like that. So you need to be managing that traffic. Clear out the room to the greatest extent possible. So I went into a trim room last month, and it was a pretty tiny room, and it seemed extremely cramped. When we started looking around the room, there were brooms in the corners, some tools, some tubing that had been stacked up. There was a giant tote in one corner with cleaning materials, even though this wasn't the cleaning room. And by the time we cleared everything out, there was plenty of room to be running a tandem line in that room. So get rid of any extraneous materials that aren't there for your operations. And that is going to make setup a lot easier and prevent any kind of bottlenecks or oversights. So that then leads to the next point, and that is around planning for circulation space. So when you're trimming, it is not necessarily just a static activity. Sure, you've got the people that are stationed at the in-feed and the out-feed doing QC, but we need to have somebody who is checking on the trim tote getting full. We need to have totes of material coming into the room. We've got totes of material leaving the room. So having circulation space around the equipment is really key. So again, empty the space out and plan to have circulation around the overall trim lineup. Electrical connections. So to the greatest extent possible, try and locate your electrical connections near the trimmer. So on the Mobius trimmer, the electrical connection is on the back side of the machine. So we would generally recommend that the back side of the machine is adjacent to the wall where you have your plug-in point. If you're working from plugins on the ceiling, try and have a power cord long enough so that it drops onto the floor first to take the weight of the connection point before going up into the ceiling, and you'll be preventing shorts. So the reason why people would want it in the ceiling is to avoid having any kind of cable on the ground. But if you do have that cable on the ground, think about putting some of those thick, I guess we were talking about like an anti-fatigue mat over the cords. And what that's going to do is not only prevent a tripping hazard, but as you're bringing carts in and out of the room, either with hot swap parts or new totes of material, they can easily jump over those cords because the mat is there to act as a ramp. And then think about whether you need to have any record-keeping equipment, log books, a desk with a computer on it, scales, anything like that. So all sites have different SOPs. And if you are doing those kind of metrics right there in the trim room, you need to make sure that you've allocated the space appropriately and that you're not tripping over each other as the material is moving into that scale and record keeping area. So make sure you've got enough for that. If you do not have the space to do it properly in the room, obviously you're going to try and do that in an adjacent room. So think about the traffic flow between those locations. And then finally, under trim room layout and design, think about where the equipment will be washed at the end of each trim day. So are you going to be rolling it out into a separate wash bay? And if so, is that wash bay all the way across at the other end of the facility? If you have the ability to change that location, you'd like to have it as close as possible to the trim room. Oftentimes it's the wash bay that can't be moved because you've got drainage and that in there. So if it's possible to move your trim room closer to it, that's ideal. Cleaning is something that we're going to have a totally separate webinar topic on because it's a really big topic. But if you are going to be doing cleaning either in a separate wash bay or even inside the trim room, think about how you are allocating space to store the equipment when it's not in use and to leave it out to dry. So after washing, it's not good to be leaving stuff out there unless it can properly dry. So leave yourself enough space, enough horizontal surfaces so that things can be cleaned properly and dried properly. I'm going to hand it over to Curtis now to speak to some of his experiences in setting up the trim room at Can Group.
Just before you do, if I can just jump in real quick here, don't forget, guys, you got a whole team there, and there's always going to be one person in charge who has to make the final decision. But don't be afraid to ask your whole team, your whole trim team, hey, what sort of space do you need? How do you envision this flow going? You know, it's greater to put all your minds together and come together with something that works for everyone.
Good point.
That's exactly it, Brett. I was going to say, you've always got to be willing to work with the team. The team is what's making the machine work. If the machine's not working because the team's not working, then you're losing money. We've spent great money on a great machine. We want to make sure it's working best. So that being said, always be willing to experiment with the layout of your machine and your room. Know that you need at least 2 feet of walking space around any piece of equipment. So whether you've got the trim tote to come out, or you've got a collection tote, or you've got the in-feed conveyor, give yourself at least 2 feet behind every worker. So that if you're walking through with a tote in your hand, out front of you like this, you don't accidentally bump somebody who has a pair of scissors in their hand. It's just easy to give yourself the space and not worry about it later. That's pretty much it for that. The trimmer can be set up on the original Visit by Mobius, but that's not necessarily a dead set way that it has to be. Our trim room was originally set up with, again, the vacuum being put towards the wall, the trim tote being put towards the wall. But our workflow in our room prevented us from having an even flow and an even movement. So we just inverted the machine and turned it around. Now that being said, our exhaust does vent into the room. So we had to make sure to leave an extra 2 to 3 feet around that space that people walking by weren't being buffeted by the wind coming out. But it still allowed us to have a good flow. You just kind of, the rules of the road. Everybody walks in this way, everybody walks out that way. And as long as nobody's counterflowing, people don't bump into each other. It's just really crucial that everybody's of the same mindset when you're working in the trim rooms.
Well, guys, we got a couple questions that I'm going to throw out to you if you're ready.
Sure.
Okay. So from Alex, somebody did mention the temperature that you guys mentioned the temperature of the trim room being ideal around 18 degrees or lower. Does that go for the same if you're trimming dry versus trimming wet, or is there a difference for temperature?
Yeah, you want it the colder, absolutely. From my end here, the warmer it is, the more likely that the actual the cannabinoids are going to stick to your unit. When they're cold, they have a tendency to break and fall off, just like in an extraction process. But when they're warm, they will stick. They'll gum up, they'll create that resin, and you'll notice it way, way faster if it's above that 62 degrees, 64 degrees, anything above the 66, 68, you're going to start seeing it stick to the machine and gum up faster.
And it doesn't make a difference if it's wet or dry that you're trimming?
Nope. Resin trichomes are trichomes. They're sticky when they're hot.
With respect to wet versus dry, just purely from an equipment perspective, it's certainly a lot more forgiving trimming dry if your temperature builds up. So for wet, it's very, very critical to keep that temperature lower. Dry trimming, Curtis spoke to the actual end result of the product, but purely from resin buildup on the equipment, it's not going to be quite as noticeable dry trimming if your temperature rises up a little bit.
Okay, one more from Dell. How do you determine how large or what the appropriate size of a trim room is to be able to include these guidelines that you guys have suggested? Is there any sort of rule of thumb in terms of sizing?
Well, I'll just take that one real quick here. Obviously, the bigger, the better to a certain degree of diminishing return. On our website, mobiustrimmer.com, we have downloadable CAD files, dimensions of all of our equipment. So you can download them and do a virtual spacing and determine for yourself what's your ideal room size. But that's my perspective from Mobius Trimmer. Curtis, AJ?
We have a 60 by 20 room, and our room actually includes a drying facility in the back end of it. So once we've done trimming, we dismantle the machine, take the whole setup, move it into the front corner, and then the room gets converted over to drying. So our room is a bit different, but we use roughly half of it while the machine is set up and we're running for processing.
So about 20 by 30.
That would be a sufficient room. That would give you enough room to work around and have the employees in there and be comfortable. Yeah.
And in your case, Curtis, you also include bucking within that space?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. Yep. We have the whole setup. We run bucker, again, 3 feet away from the in-feed so that once it's done, I can take my bin directly and it goes and everybody's happy. But yeah, a 30 by 20 would be sufficient.
So I think if I were going to be planning something like this from scratch, I would list out the activities that could potentially take place in there. And as Brett said, grab the equipment, grab the downloadable CAD file, or if you don't have the ability to work with floor plans, just grab the diagrams that we have with the layout. So that's the foundational piece there. At the very least, you need to have that couple feet of circulation space around that basic trim setup. If you have more space, potentially you can be adding on the conveyors and maybe bucking in the room. If you've got a little bit more space, perhaps you're doing your measuring in that room as well as sorting. So you kind of need to either work backwards from your list and see what you need to cut out because of room limitations, or scale up what you can do there if you're noticing, oh, we could actually accommodate a little bit more in here. Keep in mind that as we're going to be covering this in a moment, just talking about hot swap parts and that, but I touched on it in the cleaning. When you are dealing with a resinous product like cannabis or hemp, you are going to, and on longer trim days, you're going to be swapping out some of those parts. So it's not just the trimmer alone, but you need to be able to have space to store and have on hand spare blades, spare tumblers, and all the empty totes and things like that. So that really does need to be accounted for before anything else, any other functions can take place in that room.
Can I actually just throw one more in there real quick, guys?
Yeah.
And this was to Curtis from M. Lempert. She was wondering about the throughput or the volume, or however you like to measure it, in your trim room.
So our trim room metric was hitting around the 85 to 90 pounds per, but that was because we were trying to achieve a polished end. So we were trying to achieve a hand trim finish. So again, your metrics can be adjusted by your expected output. So if you want something that's a little bit shaggier, then you can expect it. Just nail it. And even almost achieve over what the expected throughput is. But ours is around 80 pounds.
We've got a few more, but we'll put them towards the end of the presentation.
All right, back to me for product handling and flow. So a lot of what I want to talk about here is just some comfort items and convenience items that you can give a little thought to beforehand. So whether I'm working on my car or whatever else, I always like to make sure my tools are set out within reach. I know what I'm going to need. I don't have to, get out, climb out from under the car, go back to the workshop, get a wrench, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of that is what I'm going to sort of cover here in relation to the trim room. Let's start off with when you think about what the convenience items are and how to gain your efficiencies, we always recommend conveyors. Our machine comes with a hopper that you can hand feed, but a conveyor provides that extra consistency, etc. So I had a call from a guy, bought the conveyors and says, gee whiz, they don't fit in the room. Said, hey, try kicking the arrow feed to an L and see if that works. And sure enough, it did. So the L wasn't the ideal layout compared to a straight line, but compared to not having one at all, it was fantastic. It was definitely a worthwhile compromise. When you're on your infeed, you want to think about providing the infeed position with anti-fatigue mats. Comfortable employees are more productive. They're not going to wear out. They're going to give you more consistent results and just be happier in general. So give them an anti-fatigue mat on that epoxy floor of yours or the concrete floor, so they don't mind standing there all shift long and nice and comfortable. Also outfit your staff with comfortable, easy to wear, high quality hearing protection. These machines are loud. No two ways about that. And so the more comfortable and more better protected they can be from their environment, the happier and more productive they're going to be. As a matter of preparation, quite often the material comes into the room bagged. Now that bag might be tied in a knot at the top, or it might be sealed with a zip tie or some kind of a twist tie, etc. So get ahead of the game a little bit, untie the bags before you need them, before you run out of material. In the case of a tied bag, it's just a matter of convenience. In the case of a bag that has like a zip tie or a twist tie, those are items that can fall into your conveyor and shoot through the machine. So it's kind of an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure there as well. You want to have your material that you're about to trim prepared at an ergonomic height, something that's easy for the in-feed operator to reach, to access, so they never have to leave their position. So the sort of the common practices, you've got the operator, you've got the in-feed conveyor belt, and in behind you've got totes raised up to a comfortable height that the person can reach across the belt either by hand or with a scoop and fill the belt in that regard. So they're not bending at the waist, bending down, coming up, bending down, coming up. So part of that preparation also is not just the space for one bin or bag, but two, so that when that first bag it runs out, that operator doesn't have to fumble and switch and whatnot. They've got the second one ready to go, and then a teammate can take the empty away and put a fresh full one there. So just one of those things that will maximize efficiency for you. On the trim tote, what you want to make sure of on the back side of the machine when you're monitoring your trim tote levels, when it comes time to shut things down for a moment and swap out that trim tote, you want to make sure, again, you've got that 2-foot barrier. You can get behind the machine. You're not opening the trim tote like banging into a wall. You've got the room to operate there and have a second trim tote sitting right there ready to go, so you make that swap as timely and efficient as you can. On the outfeed, it's going to be very similar to the infeed with a couple of additional things there. You're going to want comfortable seating, whether it's a stool that rolls around or a chair, again with your hearing protection. And also think about your investment in a high quality tool. So don't go cheap on your trim scissors, etc. Get a good quality set of scissors in the hands of your operators so they can perform longer, better, etc. Not wearing their fingers out quite so much. Another great idea for the outfeed guys is to have a couple of smaller bins, whether it's a trim tray on your lap or a bin hanging off the side of the conveyor, etc., that you can on the fly pick out smalls, or in the case of something that's come out of the trimmer that's not quite trimmed, you don't want to spend a bunch of time snipping away at that bud. You just want to, a couple of snips or 2, 3, and if it's more than that, just set it in a bin, and at the end, every so often you can take that bin, send it back through the trimmer, so you're not wasting valuable man hours on actually hand trimming. Let the machine do the work. So I think, there's my final point. I covered it without even looking at my points here. So
That's how good you are, Brett.
Wow. So I'm going to hand over to Curtis here to sort of add to what I've just said there.
Absolutely, Brett. It is crucial that what you said, to have that second tray for when you see those smalls. Smalls are generally not the problem. Smalls just go. They're the ones that fill, they make through. If you have a sorting machine, that takes care of smalls. It's the large ones that we want to see. The machine missed it because it was in the clump. That's not a problem. You see it come out, you see it has tips. Put it on the tray. Then your floater can come by when he sees that tray that's large, pick it up, and he just shakes it out under the infeed. Doesn't even take a second. 2 snips, let it rip. If you're sitting there staring at the bud, you're wasting time, you're wasting money. I mean, we're not here to appreciate it, we're here to produce a product. So if you touch it more than 3 times, you're playing with it. Send it down the line, send it up the line, just get it going. The only other way to speed up processing workflow is to make sure that when you're feeding your bucker, you take all of the knobs down to the nubbins and the bottoms. You want to have a good hand length. This distance here is enough for it to be fed into the machine and for the rollers to grab it every time. If you have shorter than that, you're going to be trying to poke, take it off, pull a butt off, and then slide it through the machine. Well, you've just wasted time, and that's money. So pretty much make sure that the bucker is fed, because the bucker is the start of the machine. If you have one, you're laughing. If you don't have one, then you've got people sitting on a table and you're debudding and you're taking everything off a branch. Well, that takes time, and that's what the bucker's for. So get it clean, get the bucker working fast, and make sure that it's always feeding that in-feed conveyor. That's it.
We've got a number of questions specifically to the Mobius. So I just want to remind everybody, we are going to do a full overview of the Mobius towards the end. So feel free to type your questions in, and we'll type responses back if we can quickly, but we're going to cover a lot of what happens with that machine. And then I know that this is more relevant to the last section we talked about, but there are a few people actually now that have asked about bucking right onto a conveyor, which then runs into the Mobius. So I just wanted to put out to any of you guys if you've seen that happen, and what are your thoughts on that kind of process?
Absolutely doable. All you need to do is remove the front feed bucket from the conveyor, from the bucker, and it will drop directly onto the conveyor. The only problem when you do that, and it's not even a problem, you're just going to have to make sure that you staff the in-feed conveyor appropriately. The bucker can always do more than the conveyor can push into the machine. So you're going to want to make sure that you have people that are taking those fan leads off on your in-feed. Other than that, you're good to go.
Well, sure. I'll just toss it back to you guys. We got some more questions coming in, but I'll save them for the follow-up to the next section then.
Okay, so we'll head into the third section here. So the third section is around optimizing system feeding and results. So we are huge fans of in-feed conveyors. And if you want to maximize your productivity and really increase quality, it is necessary to have an in-feed conveyor. There are some different ways to approach things on QC if you don't have an outfeed conveyor, but it's really tough to replicate an in-feed conveyor with anything else. So there's 3 reasons why you'd want to have an in-feed conveyor. So one of them is around catching foreign objects. So Brett just spoke about this a moment ago, where as you are bringing totes into the room, if they've got a zip tie or anything like that around them, there's a potential they can go into there. So over the past month, I have heard of scissors, bolts, nails, zip ties, and gloves all going through the machine or being caught just before going through the machine for those that are using an in-feed conveyor. Those that are using the just a tote to, the hopper to load it have had some struggles. So having that in-feed conveyor to do the visual inspection to pull out any foreign objects that manage to get in there is key. The second thing is a consistent feed rate. And for a lot of people, this is the most important piece there. So it's really challenging to get a consistent feed rate if you're using an in-feed hopper. What happens is material gets swept into the machine, so it pulses it, and then the operator generally has to wait for it to move through before they sweep in the next batch of material. So the in-feed conveyor, when you use that, you've got a consistent amount of material being moved into the machine all the time. And when you've got a consistent feed rate, that gives you consistent results on the outfeed. And the third thing that you get when you are using an in-feed conveyor is the ability to do a visual inspection on the material. And this is true of the outfeed conveyor as well. But one thing that can happen on the in-feed, and Curtis spoke about this a moment ago, is another opportunity to remove some of those larger fan leaves. So those fan leaves have to be removed at some point along the way. The machine is more than capable of handling those fan leaves, but the problem is if you're feeding them through the machine, you are reducing your throughput rate, and you're also watering down your trim. So if those fan leaves can be removed while it's growing, before bucking, after bucking, or on the in-feed conveyor as it's moving into the trimmer, you're not going to be watering down your trim. So that in-feed conveyor just gives you an extra opportunity to be removing that. So this one is pretty specific to the Mobius, and that is to look for the wedge. So anybody who is an existing Mobius user has probably noticed this before. So when you're standing in front of the machine and you're looking down at the in-feed, you're going to see the blade that's the furthest away from you is going to be a little bit exposed when you're operating the equipment and you're feeding it. So we use that as a visual indicator how full the tumbler is. So you should be noticing a wedge that's maybe about 4 inches long, and that is an appropriate fullness level. When that starts extending out and you can see 6 or 12 inches of that back blade, the tumbler is likely not full enough. When you can't see any of that back blade at all, then the tumbler is too full. So for those of you using your Mobius right now, look for a little bit of exposed back blade there, and that is probably a good indicator of your tumbler being the right amount of fullness. Again, specific to the Mobius. So if you're wet trimming, we want to make sure that your vacuum is at maximum. So remember, all the Mobius dials go to 11. They don't just go to 10. We have that extra little bump there so that they can go to 11. So when you're trimming wet, you want to have vacuum on maximum and just be using the in-feed rate on the conveyor or as you're moving it in from the hopper, and your tilt angle to be dictating trim quality. So your in-feed rate on the conveyor is the horizontal push of material through the machine. So the faster you're pushing material through, the looser the trim is going to be. The slower you're pushing it through the machine, the tighter the trim is going to be. Same thing with the tilt angle. The more gravity you're using, the higher the tilt angle, the looser the trim is going to be because you're moving it through more quickly, and vice versa. So that's for wet trimming, max vacuum, tilt angle, and feed rate. If you're dry trimming, depending on the quality of the material, you may need to actually adjust the vacuum as well. So you're not just going to be using feed rate and tilt angle. If you have material that is particularly light or not very dense, the vacuum on the Mobius is going to be so powerful that it's just going to hold the material in the tumbler. So in order to release the material, we need to lower that vacuum down. If you continue to hold the material in the tumbler, it's just going to keep trimming away at it, and you'll have most of it ending up in the trim bin and just some smaller stuff coming out. So consider adjusting the vacuum on dry trimming if your material is light or non-dense. If you are running longer trim days and you need to hot swap, so particularly if you're wet trimming, but even dry trimming longer days, we call it a hot swap when you are switching out those plant touching components of the machine, the blades, the tumbler, when you get a lot of resin buildup on there. Make sure that you've got your hot swap parts ready to go and on a cart that's either just outside the room or on hand there inside the room if you have the space for it. So you don't want to be scrambling around looking for those things, because that is going to absolutely destroy your productivity. So you want to be having your cart there ready so that you can take out the dirty components, put those on one shelf of the cart, and then take your clean components, move them in, and accomplish your hot swap in a manner of a couple of minutes. And then the final point I would make in this section here, we've gone to a number of sites that have said, hey, we're not getting the throughput rates that we're looking for. What's going on? So we go on site, and what ends up being the observation is that for every hour of the day, the machine is maybe only turned on 30 or 40 minutes. They're scrambling looking for trim totes when the trim tote is full. They need spare empty ones. They've had to turn off the machine for a few minutes because they ran out of material on the infeed, or they didn't have enough, empty totes on the outfeed or their logbook materials there. They didn't have their hot swap parts ready. So for every hour of the day that you are operating that trim room, that trimmer should be functioning for, I think, 57 minutes. So that's what I think you should be aiming for. 57 minutes out of every 60, you want uptime. So that means that you need to plan breaks. I have one site where the manager there, he's doing his rounds, he's walking by the room. If he's not hearing it, he's going in and asking, what is going on? So they're scheduling their breaks so that they're staggered. So that machine is never down at any time for more than, 10, 15 seconds to do a trim tote swap, or maximum of a couple of minutes to do a hot swap every few hours. Curtis, go ahead.
Just one more thing I wanted to touch on then. There, AJ was talking about the adjustability, the manipulatability of the controls, tilt angle, vacuum, etc. This one goes out to Dion. Thanks very much for the tip a year and a half ago, Dion. I dispersed this tip widely. For the operations out there that are growing multiple cultivars, keep a logbook. He downloaded a bubble level app on his cell phone, and he just sets it on top of the lid, and he knows that, if he's doing Death Bubba, he's setting it at X number of degrees of tilt. If he's doing, Blueberry Kush or whatever, he does it a little different, what have you. Just a little thing that can get him up and running that much more quickly, that much more efficiently right at the outset of the trim day. So a logbook is an awesome tool to have.
Curtis, I specifically want you to share what you shared with us yesterday. I had no idea you guys were doing this, but it's so cool. Can you describe what you're doing with your fan leaves at the end?
Okay, so that's at the end, and that is exactly it. So you have your in-feed conveyor where everybody, if they are removing your fan leaves off, they drop, they hit the floor. Some places do throw those in the garbage because they're fan leaves. Well, unfortunately, if it's a CBD crop, you're throwing away CBD. So what we decided to do with one of our CBD crops was decided to take the fan leaves at the end, and load them onto our conveyor. So instead of tilting our machine to exit our last few runs of bud, before we got there, we stopped it. We pulled the trim tote out to save our good shake, so as to not dilute it or water it down. We put on a fresh trim tote and proceeded to line through a small level, a small layer, again, an even consistent belt, and we pushed it through. And after about 5 to 10 minutes, it has taken all of your bud and pushed it out the end onto your outfeed conveyor. Now, interestingly enough, the Mobius will not let the shake out of the barrel if it's at a dead level. It will continue to pull and pull and pull every fan leaf through that barrel and leave you with nothing but a handful of polished little kernels and nuggets that you didn't realize you even missed by pulling off those few and throwing them directly onto the ground. It was an interesting day when we decided, well, this machine has done absolutely everything we've thrown at it. Can it do our shake? So we did, and it does. So keeping that in mind, you don't want to overload the machine. Again, stacking is packing. So if it's up like this and it's touching going in, it's just going to pack up. It's just going to become a lump, and it's going to flop through. It's going to flop over, and it's not going to actually be trimmed, just like as if it was weed. If you've overloaded your barrel and you're not seeing that wedge, the wedge is gone. You're no longer going to see a wave. It's not going to look like this rolling inside. It's just going to be a lump, and every time it's just going to flop over. So, I mean, the machine itself is great for trimming. It's great for collecting your trim for post work. So we can actually take all of the trim and extract it, and then we can take all of the shake and put it through as well. It's a great way to make sure that everything is processed. It saves us on our biomass end. From our extraction in-house, we'd have to take all of that leaf material and then grind it up into 2 micron or less. So the trim's already being doing for us. We're just taking advantage of your machine. It's all you guys, not us.
Very efficient and very creative.
And on the topic of, Curtis, your particular efficiencies and creativity, you also mentioned yesterday on our call there that you were utilizing the bucked segments of stem to carry forward as well. You want to touch on that real quick?
Absolutely. So again, everything that you use in this building, or everything that we use in this building, gets reused. The bucker itself is processing out the waste in small little chunks like this. And again, that biomass is perfect for extraction. If you have a CBD crop, CBD lives inside. We don't live it outside, so you have to make sure that you have all of the ends available for your ethanol. If you have a long strain like this because you've just been bucking, well, you have to do something with that. That's going to become an extremely difficult processing biomass. You've got lots of sticks and lots of breakage, whereas the bucker just likes to buck it into little 2-inch pieces, and away you go. Footnote on the bucker as well, don't forget the bucker has the ability to modify speed as well. If you have something going too fast, you're going to shred your buds. If you're not looking for an industry standard nugget that's always going to be that big, you might want to consider turning your bucker down a little bit. It doesn't always have to run on 11 because that's going to create pressure at the end. When it gets that last bud, it's just going to and just pop it all off and degrade that one cola that you might want. So just consider that when you're running things through the bucker. Yeah, it may be for speed, but if you're worried about quality, you have the ability to find it there.
Cool. I have 2 questions I'll fire off at you guys. We talked a little bit about hot swapping. We just kind of referenced it, but Christina had a question on that. You might want to maybe cover this again at the end, but she was curious what parts are actually being hot swapped when you're talking about a hot swap, and then how long does that process take, or how long should it take?
So I'll maybe take that one first, and then Curtis, I'll go to you for a specific example. And the reason I want to take this first is because each site is a little bit different, and I would say that it's somewhat specific to the strain as well. So in some cases, you may only hot swap the bed knife, and that's the only place where you have a lot of resin buildup. And that is a very, very simple, very, very quick task. Particularly for dry trimming, that might be all that you need to do. You're not getting a lot of resin buildup on the other components. If you're wet trimming and it's a really, really sticky strain, or the temperature in your room has gone up, you may end up getting buildup on other components, or if you're trying to really, really stretch the time between swaps, because we do have some end users who are running 12, 14, 16 hours a day. They're definitely going to need to do a hot swap. In that case, the other end of the spectrum would have you swapping out the 3 blade components on the Mobius. So that is the bed knife, the spacer bar, and the helical blade. So all 3 blade components. and the tumbler and the brush. So those are two components in the lid. So if you were going to do a full hot swap like that, Brett and I did a hot swap. Now, to be fair, it was dry.
Yeah.
I don't mean dry trimming. I mean like the machine was clean.
Brand new unused machine.
And we were 90 seconds. And I think we could beat that now.
We can.
We've been working out. We've been practicing.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
To be realistic, if you were going to be hot swapping the full meal deal in the room, I think if you gave yourself kind of 5 minutes, and that includes taking the machines out of tandem in order to get the tumblers out and everything else, you could accomplish the whole thing for the two machines in 5 minutes. So Curtis, how long does it take you guys, and what do you hot swap?
Yes, no, perfect. So the hot swap itself, when you're doing the hot swap, I always recommend that you have a minimum of 2 racks for everything you've got. So you've got a rack holding your clean room and an empty rack for your dirty units. You're going to be changing on average between 3 and 9 at a minimum pieces. If you do have a sticky barrel, you can change it then too. We've done it where we did the Death Bubba and had to change all 9 pieces below and the barrel and brush clean twice in one 8-hour shift, because the Death Bubba itself was so sticky that it was just absolutely gumming it up. And it's one of those things that no matter what trimmer you've worked with, you can recognize that howl, that squeal that's starting to come up. We kind of think of them as contractions. You let it run for about 5 seconds, you hear that little squeal, and if it happens for more than 5 seconds, closer than a couple of minutes apart, you know you're changing those blades. Don't let it run. Don't let it make that noise. It's not good for the machine, and it's not good for your trim. You're spending time, wasting time on a trim that's not going well. You're going to notice that as it starts to squeal, your outfeed conveyor is going to look shaggier. You're going to have more of those that are hitting that big bin that are going back upstream. So it's always beneficial to change it right when you know it's starting to squeal. We all know that sound. That sound is unmistakable being the trimmers. So once we start to hear it here, somebody you'll see do that face. Oh, what's that sound? And so instantly I know that that's time for a hot swap. It takes, at that point, you do the barrel, you do all your helicals, you do your bed knives, and you get it back up and running again. As AJ said, you're looking at about 5 to 7 minutes, depending on if it's really sticky and cranky, and it's up and running. Yep.
So I saw the question come up there at least once. Do we have a video on the hot swap, the 90 seconds that AJ was just talking about? It is on our website.
Jonathan posted it.
Was it posted? I didn't see it come up on the screen.
Yeah, I posted, so there's a page that's a how-to hot swap, and that's got a more instructional video. I posted that. That's in our Mobius Academy. I also posted, and this is the one I feel like is personally more fun to watch, our pit crew version of the hot swap, where we do it in about 90 seconds. It's pretty awesome. I just posted that link in there. Take a look.
We need a retake of that, and then we'll have to post our 2 versions, because it'll be so fast that people won't be able to really actually see what we're doing. So then we'll have a slow-mo version as well available. Yeah.
And we should set up a challenge, because here at CDC, we've definitely been working on how fast we can pop that entire system. I got my master grower. We have a very good handoff technique. We could beat you. I
believe we still have our offer on the table to anybody. So Curtis and anybody who's online right now, current or future user, I think it was pizza and swag for the crew, if you can give us video evidence of doing a faster hot swap than us.
All right.
I'd love to see that.
Okay, challenge has been put out there. Gauntlet has been thrown down.
One more question before I let you guys move on. There was a question from Christina. She was mentioning losing or generating some waste on the floor during infeed, things falling off the conveyor. Was wondering if there was any specific tips or anything you think you could suggest to help with that.
So I'm wondering, we had developed the infeed conveyor guide, I want to say just over a year ago now. So Christina, maybe if you want to get in touch with me afterwards and we can talk specifically about your situation. So for those of you that maybe were an early Mobius adopter, we're always trying to innovate here and come up with some new stuff. So one of those accessories is an infeed conveyor guide, and it really marries the trimmer with the conveyor, and we notice that nothing is dropping in between them once you're using that. That has been sort of the most foolproof method. The other methods are a little bit more sort of ad hoc in the moment by, affixing a bag to the trimmer or something like that. There's always a little bit of a workaround, but to do the permanent solution, it's going to be the in-feed conveyor guide.
The in-feed conveyor guide was actually an added benefit when we added it to our system as well. We put a couple of little notches on the side plates that allowed it to get even closer to the Mobius. So there was only about a quarter of an inch of room. So that even there's that little butt stop where the plate goes against the Edna, and there was that little bit of gap that we snuck up, and it takes a lot of that away. As far as if you're de-leafing and that debris is heading to the floor, we usually use just the top of a dome from your clone trays. 3 of them fit uniquely in between. You squish them, and they hold their way in between there. So as you're de-leafing, you can throw directly in between. It goes right down to your feet and ends up landing directly in the bin. And that's the stuff we collect for the end to push on through.
Okay. We're good, Jonathan, to move into the next section?
Yep, let's hit it.
Okay, question we get asked all the time is staffing recommendations, and we see it all. We've got, one operation that's running, like one dude literally is running 3 tandem lines. And then we've got other operations that are throw a lot more personnel at it and deliver that total AAA top shelf by hand polishing everything to the nth degree. But as a general rule, we can kind of break it down to the following here. You're always going to have a trim team lead, kind of the quarterback, and that person may be the floater. We'll touch on floater in a second. But generally, starting with the in-feed, you're going to have 1 to 2 people on in-feed. Depending on what your material prep looks like. So in Curtis's case, they're doing bucking right beside the conveyor belt and de-leafing as the second in-feed person. So you got one in-feed person feeding in the flour, the second in-feed person, or I guess you'd switch that order. The first one de-leafing, the second one feeding the flour into the belt. So 1 to 2 people on in-feed. You'd have 2 to 4 people on out-feed. That are going to be doing what we touched on earlier in the outfeed ergonomics, sorting out large or not fully trimmed, polishing up, etc., and away you go. So again, it sort of depends on your process, how tight your trim is, what exactly you want out of the end product, but 2 to 4 people on outfeed is a fairly typical number. And then we have a floater who, again, could be that trim lead person. And they're going to support really everyone in the room. They're going to make sure that empty totes are removed, full totes are brought in. The floater might be responsible for documentation, weighing, et cetera, QCing, making sure that the settings on the machine are producing the optimal for their desired trim level, et cetera. So all told, you're talking 2, 6, up to about 7 people. Very often, AJ, if I'm correct on this, very often we see an average of about 5.
Yep, that's right. I didn't touch on this on the optimization section, but I think maybe now's a good time to talk about it. So, we always talk about different end users have different results depending on what you're dialing your trim into. So what does that mean? So if you are a facility that is running through massive volumes, it's a business decision for you to maybe not put anybody on the outfeed doing cleanup and to dial your trim into a level so that everything coming out is exactly the level you need. And what happens then is your ratio of flour to trim is a little bit different. So maybe you're talking about 50% flour to 50% trim. If you're doing smaller volumes though, and you're looking for a ratio where you're more like 70 or 80% flour to only 20 or 30% trim, you need to plan to have some cleanup on the outfeed, because if you trim everything to what I would call the lowest common denominator bud, so you're getting that trim down to a level that doesn't need any hand touch up, you have over trimmed much of the other material. So most places, what they are going to aim for is trimming to that 80-90% level. 80-90% of the stuff coming out of the trimmer doesn't need to be touched up or polished. And that means that they're not over trimming, and they've made a business decision to invest in the resources on the outfeed line who are going to clean up that 10 or 20% that does need the touch up. So that's a bit of a balancing act there, and it depends on your facility and how you want to allocate your resources and the amount of the volume of material that you have to work with.
So we do have a number of questions specific to the machine, which I know will be better answered from the studio. But based on the conversation we were just having about staffing, one person asked, what would be the limit on staffing? I mean, obviously, you think more people, more efficiency, but there's got to be at some point where it's too many people and it actually will kind of pull you backwards. So how do you figure out what that line is?
We have that before we moved from non to a Mobius trimmer. And that was a big problem. We had 18 people before to run with a Centurion to keep it up. And then when we went to the Mobius, we found out that we were definitely over. I think the maximum that you can go for is about 5 on the outfeed conveyor, 3 on the infeed conveyor, a bucker, and a floater. So you're looking at about 9 to 10 people. Anything more than that, and they're just wasted. They're standing around. That's about it.
And I'll maybe add a few other scenarios that I've seen run. I think that any more than 2 on the infeed conveyor is generally overkill. There's usually somebody standing around not doing enough. The outfeed conveyor, it totally depends on what you're going for. So we do have some end users who have ordered longer infeed conveyors, 10 feet, 12 foot outfeed conveyors. And they're, some of them are doing that because it's part of their branding. They actually want to touch every single bud and hand polish it, because then they're able to market that as a hand polished product. So that's one approach. You know, maybe you're looking to have a really high ratio of flower to trim. So you're really looking for the machine to just do kind of 80% of the work. And you do want to do that final cleanup to minimize that ratio into the trim. So kind of depends, but the most that I generally see on a standard 6-foot outfeed conveyor would be 4 people. Gets a bit squishy beyond that.
We had another question come in about training. So we know that for a lot of folks starting off in cultivation facilities, the trim room is a lot of the time where they start. But in terms of the positions that you guys had kind of talked about, you know, where they're doing, where they are and what they're doing, who needs to be the most experienced, and where can you put folks that are brand new at this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that the floater is probably the position that needs to be the most experienced, because they need to be aware of everything that's going on around the room. I would then put a new person on the outfeed to begin with. And Curtis, you may disagree with me on this, because I find that the infeed is a really key position. So to start on the outfeed, that's an opportunity to train that new employee of what you're looking for. So you really need to talk about, okay, as buds come out, if you use a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, that tends to be the type of scale that most producers use. Show them, and if you can, have either a chart with photos on it or some product right in front of them to say, you know, this is a 1, the loosest trim. This is a 10, trimmed like a golf ball. What we're looking for today is a 6. So this is an example of what should be taken off. This is what we're looking for any kind of mold. So that's a really good place to start. They've got a bit of backup there because there are other people on the QC line as well to help out. After they've worked the QC line a little bit, I would say then it's fair to go to the infeed conveyor. They could potentially start there, but if you don't have a sense of what's coming out elsewhere, you don't really recognize how important your job is on the infeed. You're setting the tempo for the entire room on the infeed there. So you need to have a sense of how critical that job is to keep the pace going for the rest of the room there. So that's why I would say you need a little bit more experience there than on the outfeed.
I would actually have a tendency to agree with you. The outfeed conveyor, you can get people to just identify a crow's foot or a point. It's very easy for you to see, oh look, flip it upside down. I want you to identify the bottom of the bud. Look at the bottom of the bud, because that's where you're going to find your crow's feet. They're not going to be sticking out at the top. So it's easier to train somebody on a 2-step method like that. Look, points, snip them off. Crow's feet, pull them off. The bud can then go down the line. Where in the infeed conveyor, it's almost the same. I find, again, having them look for the bottom of it and see those two fan leaves, those two large ones, boom, boom. They are the ones with the long stem. Those get taken out, and then the machine does that 80%.
So AJ, we'll just do one more question here before we kick it over to Brett in the studio.
Okay.
This question, I think part of the reason I want to mention it is because we are going to be doing more of these webinars like AJ and Brett had talked about in the beginning. One of them will be on cleaning, absolutely. That's an entire webinar by itself. So this question is a little bit more specific to that, but I promise I get it answered. A current Mobius user was mentioning that the spacer bars seem to collect a lot of resin and those can't be hot swapped. So what product could you use to clean them? She had said something I don't think you're going to like, AJ, which is that she was using 99% alcohol. So if that is the right product, great. But what else could you suggest other than that to make that process easier?
So I'm wondering if what they meant was the triangle bars, not the spacer bars.
Yeah, I think that is what they meant.
Yeah, okay, because that's right. They're attached in the lid, and you're absolutely right. So one thing to think about on ISO is that 99% ISO is typically used for cleaning electronics because it evaporates so quickly. So the whole way that cleaners work is through surface contact time. So if something evaporates very, very quickly, it does not have enough surface contact time to get underneath the soil and lift it up. So really, if you are using ISO, you really should be using maximum 70%, but probably 30% ISO because it has a higher water content. It's not going to evaporate as quickly, and it can sit on the surface, do its magic to actually lift up the soil. So on ISO, that's what I would do. But ISO is not a cleaner. So that's why Jonathan knew, and he's laughing because this is one of my little rants I always go on. So I would be using a different type of cleaner instead. And those bars, absolutely. Curtis has done a lot of experiments in this realm, and we've posted them to Instagram. So Curtis, do you do anything while operating? I know that you've got your cleaning at the end of the day when you're soaking, but are you doing anything during operation to lift up that resin from the triangle bars?
No, specifically because I would have to remove the barrel in order to do so. Those triangle spacer bars inside the lid there, they are absolutely the hardest part of the machine to clean by far. But yeah, in the middle of the day, I have not done anything specifically to get them. It would be difficult to try and clean them in the middle of the day. I suppose if it were gumming up that substantially, that it was riding against the inside of the tumbler, I suppose I could try and take a small plastic squeegee. It's like a soft, flexible squeegee, and run through there while it is still warm and fresh. But other than that, no, I don't mess with those until the day's done. Yeah,
that's been my experience as well. That even if you're getting a lot of resin buildup there, the small rings that are on the tumbler, they're nylon, they're meant to kind of ride on things quite smoothly.
Exactly.
So you should be able to keep operating with quite a bit of resin buildup on those triangular bars. At the end of the day, then I would use a proper degreaser, or Curtis goes really, really simple, and he's just taking hot towels soaked in water. And I think you were using a little bit of Dawn from time to time, blue Dawn, not any other kind of Dawn. And just wrap those wet towels around the triangle bars and let it soak on there. He's even done that overnight, and come back the next day and it just scrapes right off. If you don't have time to leave it overnight, that might be the first thing you do during the cleaning process is get that lid opened up, tumbler out, start soaking it, get the other stuff dealt with, and then take those towels off at the end of the cleaning process and scrape that down.
I have had them come clean in under an hour with the Dawn method. So I put 15 milliliters of Dawn into a liter of water. I wish I could give that to you in the other way with teaspoons per gallon, but I think it's 2 tablespoons per gallon, I believe. But then I just soak. Yeah, and then I lightly soak the towel, and I literally just lay them on top of those triangle bars. I don't even have to wrap them around.
Okay.
And it just takes that, like you said, it's surface contact time. So the Dawn itself and the water, it just soaks it up. And I've lifted it off with basically a credit card. Just those thin scrapers, and I just slide it along because it needs a bit of a flex on the inside of that bar. And yeah, you've seen my videos where I'll lift it off hoop by the foot. Just it's pure hash, and it comes right off.
Thanks, Curtis. Jonathan?
Yeah, so AJ, I think we'll cut the questions there, and I'll leave it to you to wrap things up and send it over to Brett in the studio.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for attending today. As we said at the beginning, this is our very first webinar ever, so we know that there are probably some things that we can be doing more of, doing less of. Please let us know your thoughts on that. We want to hear from you on topics. We have in mind a couple of them. Cleaning is one of them for sure. But if you have other ideas on future webinar topics, please let us know. We know that a lot of you are already Mobius users, so you don't need to stick around for the overview of the equipment. We're going to have a copy of this webinar posted to our website soon, so appreciate you being here today, and you'll be receiving an email with a link to that shortly. And for those of you who are going to stick around and get the overview of the Mobius, just give us a couple of seconds here as we transition over to Brett in our studio right now.
Hey guys, can you hear me? Have you got me on?
Gotcha.
So I'm just going to dive right on in and give you what I like to say, a good look under the hood and see the incredible engineering that went behind the design of this machine. So the first thing, this is what a complete single line looks like. It's not in tandem, obviously, as you can see, but this is what an in-feed conveyor feeding a single M108S and an out-feed conveyor looks like. I'm going to go ahead and break it apart and give you a little description piece by piece as to sort of the magic sauce behind all of our components here. Just before I do that, guys, let me just talk real quick about the in-feed conveyor guide while it's in position. This is the in-feed conveyor guide we were talking about. It slides right into the Edna where the spring jack tool would go when you're installing and removing the tumbler. And the in-feed conveyor fits it perfectly. And it's designed, if I may just step past you, Steph, it's designed so that when you tilt the machine, it goes with it. So it will carry the weight of the in-feed conveyor. So when you're doing your on-the-fly real-time adjustments of tilt angle, you don't have to consider adjusting the leg heights, et cetera, on your conveyor belt. Okay, now I'll break her on down here. So we're going to get this in-feed conveyor out of the way. Get rid of the guide. We'll roll the out-feed conveyor out of the way. So guys, you'll notice on our out-feed conveyor, the kick plates here are profiled to line up nicely with the Mobius out-feed end. And it's also designed so that when you do turn it 90 like we talked to, it still mates up nicely and collects that material. When you look at the M108S, it's different from every other machine on the market. First off, this is the entire machine. It has an onboard vac, an onboard trim separator, so there's no hoses leading off to some other piece of infrastructure that you gotta buy, you gotta clean, etc. It's all here in one neat package. The only thing leading away from this machine is the power cord. So first thing that people notice all the time is the light in the lid. And we get asked, is that UV, infrared, all kinds of different things like that. The truth is, it tells you the state of the machine. So in a loud trim room setup, we've got some million-plus square foot grows that are running 3 and 4 tandem lines. If something goes faulty with the machine, everybody in the trim room knows right away. So red is a stop state, not operable. Blue is ready to run. And then white is its running state. And when it's in its running state, the individual controls like the blades, the vac, and the tumbler are all individually adjustable from there. So we're going to go ahead and pop open the lid here and show you a couple of really cool things. So in here we've got our patented Triflex cutter system, and we've got 3 cutters instead of the sort of the norm you see out there as 1. So 36 inches each times 3, that's where we get the M108 name from, 108 inches of actual cutting length. So you get 3 times the cutting opportunity per revolution of the tumbler, which translates to less dwell time and massive throughputs. this whole system. Oh, we're going to rack them.
Oh, okay.
You want to step over this side?
Yes.
Perfect. So these are the racks that come with the hot swap kit that Curtis was talking about. So this is our flexible bed knife. Just before I dismantle it, let me just touch on the design aspect of this. On the bottom, these are the triangle bars we were talking about just moments ago. On the bottom of the triangle bars, we've got these black rubber O-ring gaskets, and they serve two functions. One, they seal it off so that all of the vacuum is drawn just through the aperture in the cutters. So you're not losing vac pressure to just atmosphere. Secondarily, and really importantly, is these O-rings will actually flex on the bed knife when you shut the lid. If you can see that bed knife flexing, it flexes it into the helical blade. And if you were to take a real close look and follow the path of the helical as it's spinning, you would see that the blade itself is flexing and waving. We call it walking bed knife over the helical blade. So that is what produces the only true bypassing scissor cut of any machine on the market. Everybody else has a rigid blade riding against their helical, but it doesn't do that true scissoring action. It just doesn't do as clean and crisp a cut. That clean, crisp cut, I'll hand these to AJ. That clean, crisp cut contributes to a couple of things. It's nice and tight to the flower, but also it makes your trim really beautiful and viable. So when you look in the trim tote at the end, your trim's light and fluffy and really nice for use in extracts, etc. It's not all, I always say, kind of snotty like in a lawnmower. So just before I take this last component out, you'll see that these helical blades, the bearing blocks on the helical blades, are set so that these guys, the spacer bars, just slip right onto the system there. Same with the bed knife on the other side. And that's it. They're in perfect calibration within a couple of thou of being dead on. So there are no calibrations. There's no clicks, etc. When this system sets in here, it's ready to trim right now perfectly every time. So this is the helical blade. Guys, as a legal disclaimer here, always wear gloves, never handle them in a vertical orientation. If they slide through your hand, it's gonna cut you to the bone. I've done this a few dozen times, so I'm pretty confident, but that's our helical blade here. So I'll hand a couple of them over to AJ, and then I'll stop and give you a little description on the final one. So something I usually mention right off the top, guys, this machine is, when we say we hand build this machine, that is the exact truth. We build every component on this machine that can be built by us here we're our own CNC, our own machining, our own metal fab, our own electrical department, all the rest of it. Like, we don't do the anodizing here. We don't, produce the VFDs, but we wire them, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a great example right here. Starting with the helical blade itself. There is nothing like this on the market. So the real smart people here at Eteros that predate my employment here invented and designed a triple TIG robotic spiralizing welder to produce our helicals from scratch to our specs. So you're not going to find them anywhere else. Once they're produced, we send them out for liquid nitriding, case hardening. Then they go off for cylindrical grinding to make sure they're perfectly round. And when they get returned to us, we fit them with our bearing blocks, which again are manufactured about 15 feet away from me downstairs in our CNC shop. And this is a slip relationship, one part, an outer part and an inner part. So when we fix this onto the helicals, we then put it into a precision calibrating jig, lock it in place, and then torque these bolts down to spec. And that's what keeps your cutter relationship perfect 100% of the time with no calibration needed.
Question on the blades, how often do they need to be serviced or sharpened?
Okay, so the blades, great question. The blades are self-sharpening. They are a wear part, and they have an expected service life of, on the bed knives, it's about 200 hours, and on the helical blades, it's about 1,000 hours. The 1,000 hour on the helical blade isn't so much a reference to the helical itself. The helical itself, it'd take forever to wear it out, but it's the bearings inside the blocks. Any industrial machine with bearings, you're only going to get so much service life out of it, but about 200 on the bed knives and about 1,000 hours on the helicals. And just for people that want to do some quick math on that, we've done a calculation when you do your regular intervals of swapping out wear parts and replacing them with new, etc. Your runtime cost, it calculates out to between $15 and $20 per hour to run the machine, including swapping out parts as they become worn, etc. So about the equivalent of a pretty affordable full-time employee to keep your parts in good service.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's how easily the cutting system comes apart. So next we'll talk about our patented air thread tension tumbler. So this is super cool. The whole idea behind the patented air thread tension tumbler is its ability to not only have a super slender profile and get the product down as tight to the cutting system as possible, but it's also perfectly cylindrical. So every other trimmer on the market has a stamped metal tumbler, and they don't even come brand new from the factory perfectly cylindrical. They have a little bit of oblong, a little bit of wobble to them. So, and they're gonna have dead spots. There's times when that bud is reasonably close to the cutter, but then there's other times where it's quite far away. And the more that tumbler gets sort of beat up and bashed around, the worse it is. This guy is held under tension. AJ, are you going to go ahead and lock that in?
I can.
This is our spring jack tool. So we just lock on the spring jack, and we're going to add some air pressure to compress. There's about 2,500 pounds of spring action in here, about 72 little springs that hold this perfectly tensioned and perfectly even. So AJ is going to go ahead and pressurize that. You see the head move back about 1/4 of an inch, and now the tumbler is floppy.
Hey, Brett, do I have to have installed compressed air in my room?
Heck no, it's awfully handy to have compressed air, but your spring jack tool will come with a pump very similar to this, if not identical. That'll take you probably about 30 seconds or so of pumping to achieve that compression. Or what we like to use at trade shows is just this little air hawk. It's like 60, 70 bucks at Home Depot or something, Lowe's, what have you. And it'll compress that down in maybe 6, 7 seconds, etc. House air is always a nice way to go though, because not only does it give you the quickness of this, you also have the air to blow down your components, get the dust and keep off as well. So on this end now, what we're going to do, now that we've got the tumbler detensioned, we're going to undo the blue locking ring. So a simple twist, and there's a blue locking ring removed. So now that gives us the ability to go around to the other side. And we're just going to turn this guy right here to release the air pressure. Off comes the tool. And out comes the tumbler. All right, I'm just going to make a quick aside here. For anybody that has the Mobius trimmer already, the early version, this is a spring pack that you just saw in action. The early version has an air piston, which necessitated this little tab, that's raised tab here, that would line up with this keyway. Going forward, you will very likely receive tumblers that no longer have that tab. The air piston lid required it. The spring pack lid doesn't. You're safe and sound either way. So we'll just set this guy aside. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just swing the machine around so we can see the back side. So I'll go ahead and unplug it. And we'll give her a little rotato. And here we are, guys. This is the back side of the machine. So this is our fan housing with the dust collection on the exhaust port. And then this is our trim tote that catches the trim leaves and our trim tote separator. So to take this guy apart, another thing I should have mentioned right off the top, a design element of the Mobius is that the spring jack tool is the only tool that you need. You don't need any other tools to completely dismantle this. I'm giving you a whole big diatribe as I go, but I can dismantle this machine by myself in like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes tops. So we'll just pop this air filter off. Next, we're going to remove the trim tote. That's the trim tote removal. Now we're going to loosen the trim tote by pressing down on what we call the hockey stick. Hey, we're Canadian, what do you expect? So we go ahead and push down on the hockey stick, and then we pull the separator out. So that's the separator, all smooth, optimized surfaces inside. It guides the trim on a bed of air into the trim tote, so your trim never touches a hose or an impeller, and makes it GMP compliant and 100% viable for all your extracts, etc. Now, the separator will break down further. Steph, if you want to focus on down here a sec. This will break down further just with a couple of thumb screws releasing the fascia. The window just slides out, and now you can access 100% no hidden crevices, etc. for your cleaning. This is the fan housing. So it rides on a, thanks AJ. Sorry. This is the fan housing. It rides on a couple of heavy pins. So we're just going to slide it to the left. And that's your fan housing ready to go off for cleaning as well.
And hey, Brett, would you be able to clean those two components with a power washer because they're stainless steel?
Absolutely. Hit them with your power washer, spray down with some degreaser, leave it for, I don't know, what are you saying? When you've got the benefit of a hot water pressure washer like we have, just clean it now. With it, yeah, but certainly spray down with a degreaser, hit it with the hose or your pressure washer, and you're good to go. Okay, even the screens will pop off here. Tool free, just a little bit of a latch there. I think I'll just put it right back on. While I'm at it, you've got your top plate comes right off. That's just a spring system, just like the fly screen in your household window. And AJ is going to pop the brush out. That's that. So if I'm not doing a bunch of explaining, as I say, I can break this whole sucker down in a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and away I go. Even the entire lid will remove effortlessly with no tools. Just a matter of undoing the electrical connection, rotate it slightly forward, lift it straight off, and that's it. So then to get her back on there, line up your hinges. Voila, all done. Reconnect your electrical, and away you go. So that's the dismantling of the machine. Give me 2 minutes. We're going to throw this sucker back together, and I'm going to show you a couple other really cool relationships that the engineering is responsible for. AJ, do you want those or these? I got these.
All right.
So you can see that the engineering and the tolerances to which this is manufactured, everything has a beautiful, nice, tight, positive relationship.
While you guys are doing that, we had a question about tandem configurations. How do you lock two units together if you're going to run them in tandem?
And once it's all together, I'll describe that for you as well.
Sounds good.
You bet.
As you guys are watching, you can notice that there is no tools or anything like that. They're literally just placing the parts right back into place. Super easy disassembly, just as easy on the assembly.
Okay, in goes the tumbler. Because this tumbler does have the tab on it, I'm going to make sure to align it with this keyway. So this end will go in second. Take a blue ring. Lock it. Very important when you're locking these blue rings, lock them 100% turned. Yeah, if you lock it portionally, that's going to put too much strain on it. So lock it 100%. On goes the spring jack. Lock the air chamber. Something like 90 to 100 PSI, compressing the spring. AJ's got the blue ring on the other side. Now what AJ is doing just before we detension, she's just making sure that the cables are nice and straight.
So I'm going to take one. I'm not mic'd, so we can't hear me. There we go.
Okay, now that the cables are nice and straight, now we're just going to release that pressure again. Off comes the tool. And we're ready for action again here, guys. So, something I wanted to point out to you is the relationship of the cutter to the blade. So let's maybe put this into a friendlier light. Is that a little better? When you have a look at the relationship between the ultra slender cable and the cutter, that relationship is something like just under 30 thou, which is about 7 pieces of paper thick. So that's as physically tight. When you've got your perfectly round cylindrical tumbler riding just 30 thou above your cutter, that's as physically tight as you're ever going to get. And to put that into perspective, 7 sheets of paper, half of a pair of scissors is probably about that thick or thicker. So you're getting done, unless you're just using scissor points, it's pretty comparable to laying a pair of scissors on the side. It's a fantastic cut, and people can't believe what's coming out the outfeed end. Let's talk real quick about how to put this machine into tandem. So, Steph, if you can grab a look right here. This is what we call the tandem hooks. So that's on the outfeed end of the machine. So I'm going to get you to use your imagination somewhat here. To put it into tandem, it's got the onboard linear actuators that tilt the machine. So we simply raise the machine up. So once the machine is sufficiently raised up, we take our lead machine, we roll it up and butt it up to this machine so that those blue tandem hooks are underneath the bumper of this machine. And then we use what's called tandem locks. We got these little items in here, little popsicle guys that we just hang on the ends of these little nubbins on the end and drop it back down. So that's it. Once this is in a tandem situation, the onboard linear actuators are real stout. They'll handle about, I think, 2,500 pounds, I think I heard at one point here. So once they're in conjunction, now all you're doing in terms of tilt is operating the tilt on the lead machine. You don't have to touch this one again. And now every time you actuate this one, it'll tilt both machines in tandem in real time. So huge difference from the competition out there. There's no rail systems. You're not adjusting each corner with a wrench to get your tilt, et cetera, et cetera. You can micro adjust it in real time and see the results coming out the other end 30, 60 seconds later, depending on what your travel time is, your dwell time through the tumbler. I think I've pretty well covered everything there, other than, well, maybe just focus here real quick. Here's your control panel, and everything is variable on the front here, as you saw me do from a distance. But on the close-up, we talked about it being a red condition. So if the e-stop, sorry? Oh, there we go. If the e-stop is pressed, you'll see a readout right here on the screen that says e-stop pressed. Errors have occurred, e-stop pressed. Tells you where to look. If you take off the safety there for the override, it says check the chute. It lights up here, tells you where to look, and we can put that magnet back on. Incidentally, let's have a quick talk about that magnet. The machine comes with the hopper and chute. They install just by hanging a little flange in here and flopping it down, and within that body of that is one of these magnets. So that satisfies the safety requirements to run the machine. and we're running with the conveyors. Then we install what we call these conveyor override pucks here and on the kitty corner opposite side, and you're good to go. I think that's pretty well the whole show there. What kind of questions have we got, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure. So one of the big questions was the impact on trim quality when you're talking about a traditional steel tumbler versus the air thread tension tumbler, and what kind of difference does it make for the air thread tension tumbler?
Well, the difference is really stark. Again, it has to do with two things: the effective cutting system of the Triflex blade system, where you do get that true scissor cut, and then with that tumbler being such a low profile and perfectly cylindrical, you can engineer that relationship down as physically close as you can get. So you're getting a true, nice, clean snip instead of more of a tearing action, and you're getting it as tight to the butt as possible. So we regularly see people who have seen the videos of our machine running, and then they'll attend a demo, and they'll watch it for a minute or two and turn to us and say, holy crap, those videos aren't doctored. Like, that's real. That's what you expect. And yeah, that's what to expect. We visited one site in California selling high-end hand trim only at about $2,400 a pound. We attended there just this spring before COVID hit, late winter, if you will. We ran a demo there, and we took a portion of that day's crop, ran it through the Mobius, and we took a handful of that, and we took a handful of their own hand trim personnel's product, and we set them down in front of their own QC people, and they couldn't tell the difference. It is, honest to God, it is, indiscernible from hand cut.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about the weight of the machine and moving it around? How mobile is this unit?
Sure. So it'll arrive in a crate included, all the wood, all the rest of it, with all the spare parts that come with it. It weighs in around 750 pounds shipped. Now, once you take it off the crate, you're down to about 550, I believe, off the top of my head, in that 500 to 600 range. I'm going to go about 550, final answer. Then once you pull off the lid, take out the separator, fan housing, take out the blades, all the rest of it, you're down right in about that 300, 330 or so range. And sorry, something I didn't touch on before is the built-in handles. So we've got 4 swivel wheels on it, good quality heavy caster wheels that roll beautifully on pretty well any interior surface, plus the 4 handles located on board. And the maneuverability of this guy is awesome. So if you find that you want to get it off the base as a whole unit, 550 pounds, we kind of do that fairly regularly here. We don't necessarily endorse it because, you could have a bad back, etc. But we can get a person on each handle and lift it up and off of the crate. If we strip her down, as I mentioned a moment ago, a person on one set of handles, a person on the other set of handles, you're lifting about 150 pounds a piece, and it's pretty easy to lift in the event that you need to lift it. With the separator and trim tote removed, the width of the machine will roll through your standard doorways. So if you have a trim room and a separate wash bay, it's no problem to remove those items, put them on your hot swap trolley, roll those to your wash bay, and then independently roll the M108S right into your wash bay as well.
And we did have some questions on hand trimming, and I know that a lot of folks come to Mobius previously using other machines, but if you were communicating to folks that have been hand trimming and are looking to step it up, what would be kind of like the best entry point if they were looking to get into a Mobius system?
Entry point in terms of machinery requirements, investment-wise?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe a single unit with hoppers if they're just trying to, get their foot in the door to this kind of system, or do you need to go for the conveyors right out of the gate?
Well, yes and no. It's one of these things where, to me, it's budget and it's volume dependent. If a Mobius barely fits in your budget, right out of the box with a hopper and chute, it's going to perform beautifully. And if it barely fits in your budget, chances are you've got a volume that you can satisfy with consistent hand feeding. In fact, Dion that I referenced earlier, he did like 700 kilograms a day through a hopper, and he preferred it, but he's like the only dude I've ever met that preferred it. But it is doable. You just have to be a little bit more dedicated to your trade, because as we touched on in the webinar, it's the in-feed consistency is sort of sets the whole thing in motion for ultimate success. But if your volume dictates, if we're doing that 700 kilograms a day, for example, you kind of dabbling in it, maybe isn't going to do you the justice that it might give you that heads up and say, yeah, you know what? I like the results of one machine. I'm going to expand. But ultimately, you're going to want it to replace those workers that, you can't even get into work right now under COVID scenarios, et cetera. So, I mean, to a person, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to cast the dispersions here, tell any lies, but there aren't any regrets out there. There aren't operators saying, well, gee whiz, I wish I knew this. I'm going to mothball this machine and hire back my 50 hand trimmers. Just doesn't happen. But I have heard that conversely about other machines out there.
Got it. So I think that's just about it, unless there's anything else you guys want to mention that we haven't covered.
The only other thing I'd really like to mention, guys, is that a major tenet of our company is customer service. Our phones are always on. You can hit us up with an email any old time, phone us up any old time. We'll move mountains to make sure that you're productive and that you're at peak productivity. If there's ever any issues, it is our #1 goal to get you up and running, and that's you've got our word and our bond on that.
Great. Well, I think that's just about it. I want to thank everybody for joining us. This has been really awesome. I hope you guys got a lot out of this experience. Just a couple of quick things at the end. I want to thank Curtis again. We really appreciate his time and his commentary. That was awesome having you on board. For an extra resource, if any of you want to dig in a little bit further, I'll point you to 2 spots. One would be our blog. It's a great spot to learn more about not just the Mobius, but about sort of industry information, really great tips for the trim room and for harvesting in general. So check out the Mobius blog on our website, as well as the Mobius Academy. The Mobius Academy is a really excellent knowledge base of videos, articles, PDFs, downloadable guides, all sorts of things based around the Mobius equipment lineup and just harvesting in general. Both those things are available on our website at www.mobiustrimmer.com. If you do want to get a little bit more info about our Mobius equipment, difference it can make in your operation, please get in touch. You can see some contact details on the screen there, info@mobiustrimmer.com. And of course, there's lots of other options available if you want to go to our website. We can even set up a personalized live demo, a little bit like what we just saw right there. So I think with that, we're pretty much it. Thank you again, guys, and have a great afternoon.
So long, guys. Thank you.